baby. We are here interviewing interesting people all over the world that allows us and gives us insights into how to live a better life. Today's episode is outstanding. We are here with a world-renowned chef, Catherine Mcconkie, and she actually trained at the Natural Gourmet Institute in New York City. She was in the healthcare field, but had a terrible accident that made her learn how to walk again and had a very hard journey through that. And she realized how much food was such an important factor of her recovery. And she went to become a chef. And so she's here with us sharing her amazing story. Catherine, how are you?
I'm great, Andres. It's so good to see you and be here.
Great, and it's great to have you. And so today, if you don't mind us telling us a little bit about your backstory.
Okay. I was a very avid scuba diver, and I went to Mexico at least every year to this one spot in Mexico every year to go diving, and I got the bends, which is decompression illness. And the thing was, I kind of knew in prior dives that I was having trouble, but I didn't want, like, my mind was in the way. So my instinct was telling me something really wasn't right. But my brain said, no, you're doing everything right. I was, up in the head part of it. Ego maybe was saying, no, it's all fine. And so so I ignored it.
Wow.
And when it happened, I ended up getting some nitrogen bubbled, and it got caught in my spinal cord. So as it evolved, there was a lot of local swelling and so forth, which left me paralyzed from about my waist down, a little bit higher than my waist down.
Wow. And Catherine, and so what did you know that you were paralyzed right when the accident happened, or how did that occur?
No, I didn't, because I was very internal. I was really watching a lot of my gauges and the time and so forth. I was added a little extra time onto my safety stop, but I had some sort of pain in my chest that I had experienced on other dives and I had ignored, and it happened again. And I thought, okay, this is starting to be a little bit too often, and I actually wondered, am I having a heart attack? Not that I know what that feels like. I said, no, I don't think that's what this is. So I stayed, down a little bit longer. And then when I came to the surface, I put a lot of air in my vest in case I passed out or something. And
Huh.
I wasn't aware anything was going on, except for that I was getting water in my mouth because I was tipped over to one side, apparently, that I did not realize. And then I couldn't get to the boat, back to the back of the boat. And I've done it, hundreds of times before. So I feel like finally I realized, all right, if I could do this, I would, I would get there and get off, get in the water. But instead I was sort of bobbing away. Um, yeah. And it was interesting because my dive master, when I finally, acknowledged that something was wrong, I didn't know what. My dive master came over and he got behind me, and I said, I was quite puffed, quite buoyant in the water. And he said, I said, are you there? And he said, yeah, I'm here. And then I heard a voice that just said, turn it over, turn it over. And I just sort of felt this, it sounds a little bit funny, but this kind of, it's not even a thought or a sensation or anything particularly. It was just this knowing of, like, lifting from one direction and plunking a different one, and just like, this is out of my hands at this point.
Wow, that is. And so at that point, were you fearful for your life, or not fearful, but did you thought that, oh, am I dying here?
Um, Not really. I think it was because I didn't know what to expect, that I was a little still, naive, I guess, to what was ahead of me. I had heard about the bends, I'd read about them, I'd researched them. I was working on this actual sort of as dream I had about a device to analyze nitrogen, because we all off gas nitrogen differently. And I ran it by one of my attendings it was an anesthesiologist, at the hospital where I worked. And so we chatted about it and drew it up and stuff. But so I was quite versed on it. What I wasn't prepared for was that it does actually hurt quite a bit. And once I got onto the boat and I heard them speak Spanish, so I knew that they were getting, people in place to come get me. We were on this really slow boat far out there in Cozumel, and it began to hurt. And I think that's why they call it bends, is because it hurts. It bends you over, basically.
Wow.
And I'm not sure why it's so painful, but it's pretty excruciating. And they put me on, I was on oxygen and I think still trying to control things to a certain degree at that point, because I made sure the flow, they had, non-rebreather mask on and things. And I thought to myself, if it's going to hurt this much, I don't think I can tolerate it, because it was pretty bad. Yeah. But it passed, thankfully. And yeah. And so I was I guess, just sort of waiting to see what happened next. There was a part of me that I was afraid, but not terrified for some reason, thankfully.
Did you kind of realize that it wasn't like what you were saying, that it was kind of not up to you anymore, and so you kind of just went with it?
I had to surrender. There was a big part of me that had to surrender. And my dive master at one point, of course, I wanted to control it. I wanted to, you know, uh, make sure everything was kind of, whatever, orderly, rather than just let them do their job, which was get me to a decompression chamber. And my guy said, we don't have a lot of time to fuss here. Let's just get this going and, get you in an ambulance, which we did. Yeah. And at that point I was able to still walk. I didn't walk very well, but I was able to walk into the chamber. But
Wow.
as I spent time in there, it became much more. So I think I just didn't know.
Gotcha. And when you were walking, you didn't put the two together that you were gonna lose.
Mm.
You just thought it was from the shock, from whatever, that you were kind of walking a little bit hard, but you didn't think that you were gonna become paralyzed.
No, I had no idea. And
Wow.
the doctor, I remember telling my friend, because I had already told him ahead of time, here's where my insurance information is, blah, blah, blah. And he came to the clinic with me. And the doctor said, well, you'll probably have to spend the night here. And I remember being a bit arrogant and saying, oh yeah, well, we'll see about that. And I told my friend that I'll probably have to stop diving for the rest of the trip, but I'll meet you tonight and we'll go get some black bean soup or something. This place I liked in Cozumel had great black bean soup. Because I thought I'd go home and, have a beer and be on my way.
Wow.
That part didn't happen.
Yeah. And so at what point did you realize this is bigger than what I thought?
While I was in the chamber, probably. Yeah, and that was again, it was a little surreal. I feel like I'm really lucky. I feel like this whole thing was really planned out. It was super divinely orchestrated, that I had enough understanding about gas, pressures, and chambers and all that kind of stuff to kind of satisfy my mind, part. But it started getting really uncomfortable in the chamber. I was in there 6 hours. I mean, it was a long time. And
Wow.
this little guy was with me. They call them tenders, and he was there to watch the monitor and stuff. I guess I remember trying. It was just kind of comical at points too. I remember I wanted to watch something having to do with San Francisco, right? So they had these movies that you could watch to help you, quit being bored. And so I chose to watch. The only one I could think of was this one called Pacific Heights, which is this horror film almost. This like thriller movie, and I thought, oh, this is kind of stupid. Why am I watching this crazy stuff? But it became harder and harder as I was in there to balance. It was only, I don't know how high this thing was, but you really couldn't stand in it. It had a mattress in there, and use the bedpan and stuff. It was just getting kind of hard and wobbly, and
Oh.
and when I came out, pretty sure I wasn't able to walk, or I could walk really. I think I walked with major assistance, but I was, it was just everything was shutting down.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then from there, they took you into the ICU, or did they realize, or they just started realizing that you were losing your feeling?
Well, by then I was still in the clinic. So that first night, I stayed overnight in the clinic. He was right. Oh yeah, guess what? He was right, the doctor, and and they were able to put an IV in me and keep me on the oxygen and things. And then I went back into the chamber in the morning, and they started making plans for me, and a folate catheter. They made plans for me to be airlifted back to the U.S. because this was it was a bigger thing than. I wasn't getting better. I got worse.
Right.
Yeah.
And in that morning, then you couldn't feel you couldn't move your legs, you couldn't
No,
walk.
no,
Wow. What was
no.
going through your mind at that time?
Um, at the night before, my friend Steve was there, and they'd gotten an IV in, which was great, and I was able to get some Valium, which was great, or Ativan, and because my nervous system was twanging everywhere, and it felt terrible, and I think I was also feeling anxious, and I was afraid I was going to stop breathing because I've never had Ativan before, and I knew they gave me a pretty hefty dose, so asked him to. So I was a little worried I was gonna, stop breathing in this clinic in Cozumel, and then by morning, I asked the guy if I would um, ever dance again. Actually, not walk or work, but dance, because I have this dance movement practice I did that I had just basically found, and it was really quite, it's sort of it's a spiritual practice. And he said, I don't know. And so I remember sitting in the wheelchair before going into the place, and back into the chamber, and I thought, I don't think, and I'm not super spiritual, but I thought, I don't think God would have given me something that felt so right and take it away from me. I just didn't think that was my destiny. And I remember having that internal conversation with myself
Wow.
about, I just don't think that's my destiny. And I didn't know anything beyond that, other than, I guess it was a moment of faith where I just thought, okay, let's see how this plays out. Because so many things that led up to it. Um,
Wow, that's a crazy story, Catherine, and so much more into it. I want to hear so much all about it. And when you were going through all of that, um, and so then you were airlifted to the U.S.
yeah, to
and
Miami.
then and then they realized that you couldn't walk, you couldn't move you were paralyzed.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so they knew I needed to get back to the US because I was going to need physical therapy and, more specialized care. This was more of a clinic that it wasn't really equipped to have
Right.
the kind of level of care that I needed. Yeah.
And then through in the hospital, then when you were in the hospital, you started maybe realizing that the food was not helping you or making things worse, or
Yeah, well, that was all part of it. I mean, the hospital was like a very interesting time for me. I was there close to a month, and I was on this rehab floor with a lot of people who had had hip surgeries, or they were recovering from strokes or something. And I was quite young, and nothing looked broken on me. Didn't have a bandage I could put on myself or anything like that. So there was a bit of, what's wrong with that person? You know, uh, like this kind of, it was an interesting thought about like having to justify why I was there, in some ways, because nothing looked wrong. Um, and and so my day became about just doing the therapies, going to physical therapy, occupational therapy, getting up. I was able to wear my own clothes, which I had with me because we had been on vacation. And um, part of the thing was you got to choose, circle the things. In those days, this is 95, so you circle, the menu items that you want. And and nothing sounded good or nourishing to me at all. Um, and so I had so I began began to dawn on me, if you're in that situation, there's nothing, if the food actually has no appeal, then there's no real incentive to um, eat it. And I was losing a lot of weight. Actually, I lost quite a bit of weight.
Wow. And so when you were having this realization and throughout all that journey, what is it that you want to accomplish?
Well, I was hoping to give my body something that would help it do its job. And at some point, I realized, how in the world is a body ever supposed to heal itself if the food that it's getting is so devitalized? If there's nothing in it except, a certain amount of protein, fat, and carbohydrate, but there's nothing, the vitamins and nutrients and things are missing. Um, Also, what occurred to me is that what the food wasn't really right for somebody whose digestive process was slowed way down. So it was not helping that situation at all. I had some green. Do you know what green powders are? Those little
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
Nalchi or spirulina. I had a blend with me that I remember saying, "Okay, at least I have this green powder with me. I'm going to see if it's okay to use it," because I thought, well, I can at least start putting in my own micronutrients when available. So, of course, I had to get a lot of clearance for that from from the whole medical team. Is it all right if this goofy chick from California uses this green goo powder? So. I, I thought, well, that's what I will do. I will do what I can while I'm here, and go home and do what I can.
And then at home, when I guess it took a while for you to, maybe realize what the next part of your journey or the next chapter. And when you did, what was it that you wanted to accomplish, to do?
Well, I became really somewhat of a, I don't know about a zealot, but my own zealot, I guess, for myself about, all right, my job, since I'm not really working, I couldn't work, was to give my body the best of my ability. And so I started, working a lot more with calories and with, whole foods based things. What I realized was that I think that what I wanted to accomplish was to try to get better and to try to build new nervous system, basically, because the prevailing thought is that nerve tissue doesn't regenerate. And
Right.
I remember thinking, well, wait a minute, who knows that really? We're,
Right.
we're kind of limited by what the sort of belief system is,
Hmm.
and by what the current level of research shows.
Right.
So I thought, all right, that could be true, and maybe it's not. So what if I just had faith that my body can do better, um, and repair itself, that it might. At least I know I tried.
Yes.
And then the second thing that I realized that was a sort of a big aha that I feel like I want to begin to accomplish eventually with other people is when we're really down that way, either physically or emotionally or mentally or whatever, because of some circumstance, it's the time that you really are the least resource to take care of yourself. And so I found that super ironic. There was a desire to do to eat and keep my energy up and so forth, and the ability wasn't there for one reason or another. Like it took so long to get dressed, or it took an hour to take a shower and get dry, and then by then I've been to the bathroom 8 times, and then I go make a cup of tea, and then something happens. So you're constantly being pulled off, and things take a lot longer. And I think that's a really hugely overlooked piece of this whole healing equation.
Huh.
But I felt like I needed a mother at that point. I needed somebody to take care of me.
I see. I see. I see. I see. I see. And
Yeah.
so you were trying to heal yourself, and then you realized that, well, I need so much help.
I
actually.
needed a ton of help. Yeah, but yeah, I was sort of battling with my mind, that was saying, well, no, at that point I was 38, 39 years old or something. I've been doing this a while. I know, I've been on my own. I know how to do this. But the truth is that we really there's a lot going on when you're trying to get better.
Yeah, there's a lot. And when you were trying to get better, what was the first problem that you hit?
Um, I was very worried about finances. I mean, a lot of it was just sort of circumstantial about, maintaining income and worrying about that. A little bit of worrying about next steps for sure. What was going to happen beyond that time. And then I think probably the thing that was biggest problem for me is that, and I don't mean to discount, conventional medicine or anything, but it stops. There's like a real gap between
Yeah.
what the threshold of functionality is and the reality of it. And so I left the hospital in Florida walking with a cane that had 4 parts on it, and I went to physical therapy a little bit here. And by the time I graduated to a 1-point cane, they said, "Okay, that's good, you're done." And I was so far from done,
Mm.
you know. And so I ran into these like bumps about getting like again, it's sort of like I don't. I'm going to try to explain this. In order to get what I felt like I needed meant that I had to be really engaged with the fact of with all the stuff that wasn't right. So I had to like
I gotcha.
prove my case basically. So I was
I know.
talking about it a lot, like this isn't right and that's not right, and da da da. So I need more physical therapy. I would love to get
Ah,
strengthening or balance work, or I needed resources. And psychologically, I didn't think that that was really very great place to be. It's like, in the place of all this stuff that's not right. Do you
ah.
see the paradox?
Yeah, 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 yeah. I see what you're saying. It's almost like if we have meetings or something and you have the lawyer in the room and he looks for everything that's wrong. And so
Yeah,
that's the gift that he's able to, mitigate all the risk and kind of address each one of the possible negative outcomes. But if you live there, you can't really think about the future sometimes. Is that what you're kind of meaning? And then you can really create what your new Catherine looked like.
that's right. So the reality becomes that one lives in, or the lens is about what's not right. And I don't think that that's uh, I just don't feel like that's the part that serves so well, so and it's a tricky balance.
Gotcha. And was there an epiphany moment when you were going through that? Was there some insight that you realized, something new, or what the next step was, or taking that into consideration, what you just mentioned, or was there a point that you had some insight?
Well, one of them was one that I mentioned already, and actually it was taught to me by a spider. But that I actually saw, and I saw like you can't really was the one about like medicine is limited by what we currently know. Our cultural belief, our medical belief is really limited by what's
Right.
currently known and
Hmm.
accepted. And I saw this little spider that was doing a lot of maneuvering on his little web, but you couldn't see the web. So it occurred to me that wow, maybe there's a lot there that's not yet seen that can be, but that's still there.
Right.
So that was an epiphany moment for me. So I decided, okay, why would I limit what my potential is by what I'm being told? I accept it, and I'm also open to the fact there's something else, you know.
Ah,
And then probably the other thing that was a bit of an epiphany moment was I don't know how anyone would get better in how their bodies would heal when the hospital food is so terrible. I'll just say it. I hope that's not gonna.
absolutely. I mean, my first complaint, which we're addressing now at the hospital I work with, in all the hospitals, is food, from the patients. It's not the doctors, it's not the medicine, it's the food. They get it 3 times a day.
Yeah.
It's something that they know. If it's one certain thing about being in a hospital is that if you can't eat able, you're gonna get 3 meals. And
Yeah.
so, and so how is that? How you interact with that? How that food is? Yeah, definitely, I can see how how that's such a big insight. And when you had those two insights, what was your plan?
Well, I had a feeling that trying to turn that ship of the hospital food was not uh, the system wasn't ready for that notion. This is 20 years ago, so it was a long time coming. Which now the good news is it's now coming.
Yeah,
So, but I thought, okay, but what I can do is continue to develop my own work. As it turned out, I wasn't unable to go back as a care provider, on the floor person. Excuse me, direct patient care, but I could study nutrition,
yeah.
and begin to offer this to other people. And then culinary school, because I realized all my nutritional information was just sort of blah 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 blah. It's like, okay, if you hand a person a sheet of paper and have them read it, it doesn't really have much impact. If you show them how to work with that actual food, I think it's much more impactful. So that did it. And I thought I can work with the care providers. I can help them. I can, I can help them be as nourished and stabilized and attended to as possible within the circumstances of an institution, or I can try.
Yeah, yeah,
So
that.
that's what I'm hoping to accomplish with caregivers team.
Oh, that is great. And so what was one of the conflicts that you experienced when you started doing all of that?
Most of the time, it's budget. I think that hospital systems aren't. There's always a negotiation around how much money goes
Right,
here or there, that
right.
type of thing. And I know that historically nursing doesn't generate income, unlike other departments. Like maybe X-ray or even RT.
Got it.
Um, Nurses don't. They cost a lot, but they do the most important work.
Yeah.
Again, there's another sort of what I felt was a little bit of an irony. It's like, okay, here's your most valuable staff employees, and the ones who also are not necessarily. We should do everything we can to nourish them and
Hmm.
support them, um, and it's not being done. So as time went on, patient centered focus towards nutrition and things starts is now becoming, kind of more of the commonplace. Um, but there's been a challenge in getting it to really be seen as like best thing we can do is support our people, our staff and our employees. I think you went on mute.
Yeah, yeah. And so, what end result you've achieved?
Well, I've got a website up that's got some recipes on it. And I've got some things through Facebook and things, so it's beginning to sort of trickle out. I think a little bit more. Interestingly, there's a sort of an interesting notion with some care providers in that they don't think it applies to them. Um, like there's a reluctance somehow
Yeah,
of saying that's out there. It's more like that's out there. It's not in here, and I challenge that. I do.
yeah.
Um, and so I realized that I'm probably up against a lot of what I was, which was, in my head a lot, and
Mm.
and 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 wanting to analyze and control, and all that type of thing. And so what I'm hoping to do is to, rather than reach through that doorway of the mind, is try to help people to find the human, the person in there, of the provider, And I'm finding that hands-on work in the kitchen or experiential type of programs or classes is helping to kind of open the door more that way so that the mind can, you know what I know that that may not make sense.
Definitely, because I think once you do, like you've worked in hospitals and helping them change their practices and with doctors and with fellows, and I think one of the most experiences that I had is actually in the workshop that I was with you, where you got us in the kitchen uh, in the Portland Medical Center, and we were right there in the kitchen, and it really changed my whole perception, the fact that they had a kitchen right in the hospital for patients. And yeah, it's something that we do every day. We eat every day. And so I think you're so right that we don't think it's something that deals with us, but the more good energy that we have, the best. It's like I tell my patients, if you don't go to, with a petroleum car to the gas station, you don't put diesel on it.
Yeah.
And even if they told you just put a little bit of it, you wouldn't do it because the motor is gonna break. But with our bodies, we don't tend to think about it like that. But it's changing now, I think, because we're realizing the importance. I can tell now, if I'm not eating nutritious food, I'm not at my A game. You know.
It's really true. Even yes, things like the way we think, the pain and inflammation, of like a sore feet or bad backs, bad moods, you
Yeah.
know, dehydration, huge in
Yeah.
hospital workers.
Yeah. And the lunchtime, I used to eat these heavy meals, and I just be knocked out. I couldn't even, in rounds, I'd be having to be, to wake up. And so now, it's so much different because the body doesn't have to take so much energy to digest, and it's just nutritious food.
Yeah.
And so definitely. And so if we were seeing the Catherine uh, from before all of this happened and the Catherine now, how is she different?
Whew, I think that it's funny almost dying. Because I feel like I was given some sort of second chance.
Huh.
I think that um, this might again. I always feel hesitant to say this because I'm not super God, type person. But I'll use the word God. Um, had a different plan for me, plain and simple. And so I think that whatever happened to me was done so with such perfect organization that it allowed me to go to a very difficult, terrifying place, just short of dying, you know, and 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 learn from it. The whole time I felt like I was learning from it. Actually, in the hospital was one of the best times in my life. I mean, people said, "Oh, aren't you scared?" And I said, "Yeah." It was kind of weird not being able to walk and things, but I knew something bigger was happening. And so, and people were sending me a lot of cards, and so I was getting a lot of support. Um, and and so I feel like I'm really one of the few people who's ever been, in some ways, I feel like chosen to have gone to that degree and not died, but able to really kind of come back from it. And so I guess how I am now is I'm a person who feels like there's a lot of, it's a mystery. It's something way beyond the thinking mind. Um, and it has allowed me to be very much more in contact with my body because, to not feel anything and to really have enough presence to notice whatever's changing and this sort of thawing that happens from inside out. No, how many people have that opportunity in their lifetime?
Yeah.
And to have that experience. Um, yeah, and yeah, yeah, to learn to walk as an adult, when we're little, and a baby, to go from diapers to not diapers. I mean, that's all part that we know. To do that with an adult mind is really a privilege, in my opinion.
Wow.
You know, um, and so I feels like I got to re-input some things that I feel like made me a more creative, a better, a more understanding person. Um, yeah,
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. And when you were going through that, what type of meaning did you tend to give these things? Like it just sounds like like you had that out of all of this, you got so many lessons, of course, and so were you always trying to find kind of like a meaning? I guess what kind of helped you through that to okay, I'm going from diapers to no diapers, I'm walking to no walking. What
yeah,
type of practice did help you to kind of go through that? Was it curiosity? Was it what type of thinking pattern?
yeah. That's a great question. I think curiosity was huge in there because, and there was just some sort of knowing, that some sort of knowing that despite how it all looked out here, there was some sort of knowing that something that I wasn't going to be, kicked down by the universe. It wasn't so that the universe could kick me down. It was so that the universe could create this scenario that would change me somehow. And so I was curious about it. I would say curiosity. Now I wasn't always in that space. Let me tell you. I mean, it was plenty hard at times and frustrating, and it's terrible, and crying, and all of that. I recorded it though. I mean, I was aware enough to know I couldn't actually write. I didn't have the whatever the sustainability to write it all down, but I could talk. So I have a whole bunch of those little tapes that I've never
Wow.
actually since listened to. I should probably one of these days.
Oh, that is probably really, really interesting to see the spaces that you were and
Yeah,
how you progressed through the whole thing.
yeah.
Wow. And Catherine, if we were looking at a movie of your life, if we were watching a movie of your life, at what point in the movie we would say, "Oh my God," or "Oh geez," or "Wow."
Um, I think it would it's a thought provoking question.
It is, yeah.
I'll just go with what's coming to me right now, and it was that probably that moment in the water when I realized there was something I couldn't do, and I heard that voice that said, "Turn it over," and I just surrendered to that, you
Wow.
know, um, because it became like literally. I remember having this sensation that I was kind of picked up off of one thing and plunked here.
Huh.
So even though outside it was, looking kind of grim in terms of being paralyzed and stuff, there was something was switching at that point.
Yeah.
Came a different path, a different journey.
It's like you met your destiny. It's like
Yeah,
180.
yeah.
That's so cool. And Catherine, what's next for you this year? What's next for you this year?
Well, I'm developing this practice now. I'm taking it even a little bit more where I'm a teacher in a discipline called open floor, which is a movement practice. It's a
Uh-huh.
mindful movement practice. So I'm very much an embodiment practice. And so what I've been doing is developing my whole curriculum as a movement teacher. I'm certified as a movement teacher, but I've been overlaying it into cooking. So how are these resources that we learn about and have learned about on the dance floor, which we can also then help us in life, how do they also apply when we're making choices around food and around wellness and around relating to each other in the kitchen or ourselves in the kitchen or ourselves in a beet or ourselves in a potato. I mean, something, like that. So I'm really exploring that whole piece. And that's what I'm developing now.
Wow, that sounds so great. I recently we did this accelerator with a bunch of people from all over the world, and I was surprised that about 30% of these people were movement practitioner, movement. And I didn't really know, to be honest with you, I didn't really. I mean, I moved, but I didn't really know a lot about it.
Yeah.
Then the more I looked into it, it was so fascinating. Starting to read about these practitioners and the whole movement is a huge movement. Uh, and to realize that when the World Health Organization described as the key factors in chronic disease, nutrition and movement, a sedentary lifestyle for that means, I realized then how important it is, these two things together. So you are at the forefront of these two things, and so that is really exciting. And thank you so much for sharing with us this amazing story of yours, and looking forward to seeing all the amazing stuff with that you're doing with hospitals and leaders in the medical and health industry. And so just really looking forward to that. And I have to we'll have to do another interview in a year or so to see how everything is going.
Very good. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the conversation we've had and your interest.
Yes, definitely, it was awesome. Well, thank you so much, Catherine.
Okay.
Okay, bye bye.